What's up, everybody? I am Kidae and welcome to my channel. So this part of the channel is called Kidae's Thoughts, and it's a place where I just speak about random thoughts that I have about philosophical topics, just generally things that I normally don't get to discuss on a day-to-day basis. And I thought that this would be the perfect place where I can just bring up these topics. So it's the first of these episodes, and I think I'll just be, talking about some of the things that I generally tend to doze off about. So, today's topic is about the not so evident, self-evident truths. So, one of the texts that I like the most in the world is the Declaration of Independence of the United States. And in that Declaration of Independence, there's a part that goes something to the effect of it is a self-evident truth that all men are created equal, and that the Creator has endowed these men with a certain unalienable rights, of which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I've always loved that part of the Declaration of Independence. However, I have thought that it's kind of ironic because I love how they worded it, self-evident truths. There are some things in life that don't require a certain explanation, that you can just understand on a self-evident first principle basis. And I think the founders, the first founders of the country, thought that it was self-evident that all men were created equal. I would think that by that he meant by races. All different races were created equal. Also maybe by genders. Now, the interesting thing is that for a large part of history, it wasn't self-evident that all men were created equal. Furthermore, it wasn't self-evident that we had unalienable rights like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The entire, the slavery part of history of the United States is a clear indication that at that time it clearly wasn't self-evident. People didn't think that it was self-evident that different races were equal, and it's just how people at that time thought. If you go back a little bit furthermore to the past, it wasn't self-evident that we had the unalienable rights to life, liberty, or pursuit of happiness. We were born into different social status, different social classes in some countries, and you didn't have the right to pursue your own happiness. You didn't have the right to freedom, and if you go back even further, you didn't have the right to life. People could take your life, and it was perfectly legal. It was perfectly all right for the Caesar, for the Tsar or the Caesar, to take a person's life. And so in light of that, I think that it's quite ironic that right now, when we read that, we actually feel like, yes, these are self-evident truths, but they're clearly they apparently weren't so self-evident. So today's episode is about what other not so evident, self-evident truths are there that remain in society, that we're living by day to day, even today, where maybe in the future, maybe in 100 years or 200 years from now or 1,000 years from now, people will look back and say, wow, that is a self-evident truth. How could they not have seen that? But these days in our society, we just don't see that as an evident truth. So I just thought it'd be interesting to talk about what some of these things are. In my personal opinion, these are just my thoughts. I think today I'd like to discuss about three topics that I think are actually that people don't really see that the way that I think people should. So the first topic is about the life of animals apart from human beings. When when there is that expression of all men are created equal, and it includes women, all humans are created equal. I think these days there isn't really a consensus that. So there is a consensus that all humans are created equal, but there isn't a real consensus that all animals, um, whether it be humans or dogs, or monkeys, or rats, are created equal. I think that there is actually a clear consensus that human beings are better than other animals. Not just in the sense that they're smarter, but that it's all right for human beings to kill other animals, and it's all right for human beings to give a lot of pain to other animals. And I understand that, if you look at the natural selection of predators and prey, that it's a natural process to eat, your prey. However, I think that life doesn't always work by how historically nature has worked. If that were the case, then even within human beings, the stronger ones should be able to kill the weaker ones. And I don't think that that is how people think anymore. I think ultimately, there needs to be a very deep discussion about whether a life form is valued more if it is smarter. And that would entail that if we ever found another life form smarter than us, then they are just more worthy than us. Just the same way as we kill other animals and we eat them, other life forms, aliens perhaps, if they ever found us and they were smarter than us, then they should be able to kill us, to eat us. But when we're in the receiving side of that, it doesn't really seem like that. It doesn't seem like that should be the way it is. I think that, in my personal opinion, it becomes evident that the value of a life should not be determined by how smart you are. And in that sense, I do think that it is wrong, the amount of pain that we're causing these animals in the process of farming them. And I will claim that I am not a vegan. I still eat meat, and I think that that is something that I do need to think more about. But I still will not, use that as an excuse to bring up the topic of whether other life forms are really beneath humans' life forms. If we really have the right to just, to kill other life forms and to eat them and give them a lot of tremendous pain in the process of doing that. And so ultimately, I'm very, very happy about companies like Beyond Meat. I'm very happy about companies like, Impossible that are bringing, whether it be vegetable-based, meat, or just trying to minimize the amount of pain and the amount of lives that we take of other life forms, animal life forms specifically with a brain, that feel pain, just like we feel pain, but are not being treated as respectable life forms. So I think that is the first part that I believe maybe in the future, maybe a couple 100 years from now or 1,000 years from now, they'll look back and say, wow, that was very, very cruel what humans did to other animals. Cutting off the beaks of chicks, when they're young without any type of anesthetics. Electrocuting cows so that they will move in the direction that they want. Just, there is a lot of factors that go in that are, that are immoral in the way that we treat the animals these days. So, that's the first topic. And the second topic that I want to talk about that's also not so self-evident truth is I personally think that these days our modern society has a very poor understanding of happiness. I think that we are living in a very materialistic world in which a lot of the ultimate end goals of many young people are just make a lot of money, buy a lot of materialistic things, maybe have a private jet, a G5, a G6. That is like the ultimate goal that they can think about. Going into a Louis Vuitton shop and just buying out the whole place, living lavishly overall. I know that, pleasure and gratification is something that you can't deny as just human beings, which are animals, it triggers a part of the brain that gives pleasure. However, I think that pleasure, immediate pleasure and happiness is not necessarily the same thing. I think that as animals start growing, in their intellectual capacity, it requires some other deeper factors apart from just instant gratification to provide true happiness. And I think that that is a discussion that is not had enough. There have been plenty of scientific researches that have shown that money is not so related to happiness. It's related with happiness up to a certain amount, up to a certain minimum amount that you require in our modern society in order to survive. The minimum amount that you need to survive. And I think up to that point, if you don't have that, then money will impact your happiness in a great deal. But I think that it's been shown several times that as long as you're making more money than that, minimum standard of living, then money stops being directly correlated with your happiness. It stops being that the more you have of it, the happier you are. And ultimately, why people want to make a lot of money is to be happier. It's clear that it's not one or the other. You're either trying to make a lot of money or be happy. No. It's you're making a lot of money to be happy. The ultimate goal is always to be happy. Making the money itself is not the end goal. And so then I think it becomes very important to think about whether making a lot of money makes you happy. And ultimately, the research has been showing that it's not the case, that money does not provide happiness. And if that is the case, then we should very seriously reevaluate a lot of the activities that we have in life. Whether we should put making a lot of money, as our most important priority. Is that the strategy that will maximize our happiness? And I think that just from what I see, I believe that a lot of people work under just the assumption, the default assumption, that making the most amount of money they can will provide the maximum happiness they can. So I think that is quite unfortunate that young people these days aren't educated on that fact, that their parents, many cases, don't agree with the fact that money doesn't necessarily buy you happiness, and so the parents encourage their children to make the most amount of money they can, and ultimately it's just a cycle that keeps on going that makes people focus their highest priority on maximizing the amount of money they make. And I think that as more and more research comes out, slowly society will come to a clearer consensus that making a lot of money is not necessarily the highest factor in maximizing your happiness. And so then I think that people will start focusing on other issues, maybe on what it is that they want to do with their life, whether their profession is something that really matches their passion. Other factors, I think, will become more important in their life. And I'm not saying that nobody lives like that. There are plenty of people living like that today, but still, I think the overall majority of the population lives with their biggest focus on money. And so I think maybe in the far future, people will look back and say, wow, it was a really, really primitive goal to have, to just try to maximize one single factor in this world, the amount of money they have in order to maximize happiness. And I think that, that is my second topic on the not so evident, self-evident truths. And the last factor that I want to discuss today on the not so evident, self-evident truths is maybe, I think, the most general, but also the one that I've never really heard people discuss compared to the previous two. I think there are a lot of people that are bringing up the very important issue of the first two topics, but the third one, not so much. And so maybe not so many people will agree with me, but this is something that I've thought for a while. So, I think that there's a lot of commonalities between an individual, a country, and a company. Um, and I think that a lot of the philosophies between those three are interchangeable and have some useful form for the others as well. And I think that from those three, the one that really, really has seen a lot of philosophical evolution is actually in corporations, just because of their productivity, just because they're so useful. It's so important for a company to work effectively, and there's so much experimentation done in a company compared to, like, for say, country, which is a very, very risk averse entity. Companies are very, very risk taking entities, and so they have a lot of experimentation, and so they evolve very fast. And one thing that we've seen in the evolution of companies is that in the beginning, companies were just a lot of people coming together and realizing that when they cooperate, their whole is larger than the sum of its parts. And so that's how, the whole concept of corporations and of capitalism started in Europe and in the Netherlands, I believe. And I think that as companies evolved and became, an ever more important part of society, I think Peter Drucker played a very important role in providing a certain philosophy to these companies. They weren't just entities where people went to make more money. We realized that these companies should have a goal. They should have a goal. Not just a goal as in we're going to make the most amount of money that we can. I mean, a very concrete goal in what it is they want to achieve and what impact they want to have. And really clearly state that in written words, what it is that they aim to achieve in the next 1 year or 3 years or 5 years. It's a mission and a goal-oriented management. And so once you have clearly your goal or mission, then you can think about strategy. You can think about how you're going to do it. But you need a certain direction, a clear direction. And ever since Peter Drucker made it a very, very clear point on what it means for a company to be managed, I think since then there's been a great evolution. And now, these days, it's very common for companies to not only have a very clear goal, but not just like a 1 year goal, but why they exist. A mission statement, what it is about it. Google. Why does Google as an entity exist? What's their purpose? It's to organize the world's information and provide it in a way that's useful and relevant to people, to everybody. And so when you have a very clearly stated mission, then your sense of purpose multiplies. And I think that this is a very, very important evolution in the history of companies. The fact that they started stating their mission, stating their values, and having, 10, 12-point business philosophies. Once you clearly state that, then you become a much more purposeful entity. And what I personally think is humanity as a whole, right now, these days, in 2019, humanity as a whole is experiencing an accelerating growth, an accelerating development, and it's an exponential growth. So it is really now starting to pick up. Our society is changing at a really rapid rate. And meanwhile, humanity as a whole doesn't really have a purpose of being. There is no purpose of why human beings exist, what it is that we are trying to achieve as a race, as a species, as beings. And I think that this might be a weird thought to have, but to me, on the contrary, it's just really weird that us as beings haven't come together and discussed what is the purpose of our proliferation, of our development. We are just, we're just blindly trying to grow, develop and expand our economy expand the GDP. It's the same as companies just trying to expand their revenue, just trying to grow. But what is the purpose of that? Just as all companies try to maximize their revenue and profits, but they also came to realize that apart from just doing that, that they can be very much, it's very useful for them to have a purpose, a mission statement. And I think that us as human beings in general will one day realize that we will benefit greatly from having a purpose. I think countries as entities will also greatly benefit from having a clear mission statement. And it's weird, right now, I think in the beginning one thinks, how could a country with so many different people and different thoughts have one? But I think it's possible. I think that not maybe next term, but you have to look at humanity in terms of hundreds and thousands of years. I think that countries can grow to have certain, purposes, certain missions, what it is that they're trying to do as an entity. And I think they might end up sounding quite generic, just like many companies' mission statement is, but it's very different from not having one. I also think that another entity that requires a sort of mission statement on why they exist, what it is they're trying to do, are individuals. Us as individuals, I think, just like companies, just like countries, it would be very helpful for us as individuals to have a very clear mission statement, a very clear set of values, and a very clear philosophy, not a business philosophy, but a personal philosophy, but having that very clearly written. And so ultimately, I think that, maybe farther down the line, countries will have their own separate mission statement that their people can, fall behind, that can really identify with and say, this is what we're trying to achieve as a people. And in that way, it will unify the people that from that country. And hopefully one day, the entire humanity could have a general, broad, but meaningful mission purpose. So that is my last not so evident, self-evident truth that I think maybe people in the future will look back and say, yeah, is it not, self-evident that these things are necessary, are required. Anyway, so that was the first episode of Kidae's Thoughts. And, it really, I just wanted to discuss about these topics that I don't get a chance to discuss about. It probably came out to be a very long video, but I've been meaning to get these things out in the air to see what people think about it. And so I'll try to be back and make my next episode soon. And for whoever did watch it, thank you very much for watching it. God bless you. And I'll be back for my next video. So thank you for watching. Always remember, fear nothing, love everything, enjoy life. Peace.